Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Robin Krallman, and I want to welcome you this morning, and thank you for joining. I'm just going to give a brief background on me. I've worked in some capacity for workforce programs for over 20 years now, and I started out as a career planner many years ago in LWIA 23, and then I moved on to be a trade coordinator for about 10 years, and after that, I did some independent contract work for several LWIAs across the state. And for the past 2.5 years, I've been a state monitor. So since I've worked on both sides of the fence, I see the challenges from both perspectives now. And let's face it, monitoring can be really stressful sometimes for both sides. So I remember every year, my supervisor would share the list of sample files chosen by the state. And I remember just always hoping not too many of my files were selected, not because I was doing anything wrong, but just the idea of someone from the state looking that close at my work caused a certain level of fear or anxiety. So a healthy anxiety about monitoring is normal. We've all felt that. But having a real fear of monitoring, we don't want that for any of you. So over the years, I developed some tools that career planners could use to successfully maintain their files and in turn reduce their fear and lessen the anxiety when monitoring came around. And that's what we're going to be doing here today. I'm going to give you some insight from our perspective as monitors and also give you some guidance to help increase your understanding of what's required of you as a career planner. So when we monitor, we go through a series of questions when looking at your files. We have a choice of answers, yes, no, or NA, and that's it. So the goal is to look at your files and be able to answer the monitoring questions, yes. So keeping that in mind, let's move forward. I think it's much more difficult to achieve positive outcomes if you as a career planner don't understand what it is we're even looking at when we're monitoring your files. So my approach is we're all in this together. We're all on the same team, and when you succeed, we succeed. And it's really just as simple as that to me. So I'm going to do my best today to provide you with some guidance and some tools that will help you to be successful in maintaining your files. I want to preface this presentation by saying we have a combination of attendees today, some that work strictly with IWDS case management system, and some that work with Illinois WorkNet case management system, and some that use both. So this presentation was originally designed for IWDS users. However, the content for case note writing is also applicable to Illinois WorkNet users. So as I go along, I'll do my best to distinguish differences between the two systems as best as I can. And at a future date, we may develop a presentation strictly for Illinois WorkNet users, but for now, we'll muddle through with the information that applies to both systems. So let's get started. We're going to be talking about the art of a case note. And the topics we're going to cover in this presentation are the purpose and importance of case notes, characteristics of a well-defined case note, important rules for writing case notes, privacy, confidentiality, top 3 case note issues, and sample case notes. So the first one we're going to look at is the purpose and importance of a case note. This graphic shows the constant cycle that you as a career planner maintain as you communicate with your participants. So there's a constant flow of interactions with the participants, right? And then that information is filtered by you. And then you interpret that interaction and translate that information into the written form, which is your case note. And this is when it's critical to be able to articulate any problems or concerns, document progress towards goals and objectives, etc., and be able to accurately tell the story, because that's what it's all about. It's about telling the story. So what purpose do case notes serve? The first one listed, again, tell the story. This includes the who, what, where, when, why, and how of your participant's situation. So case notes help build a better understanding of the participant by tracking interactions, documenting referrals, and documenting your decision-making process in order to support your rationale for your decisions. Case notes help track progress and setbacks by identifying challenges and documenting how you solve the issues with your participant. Linkage to services is important once you identify deficiencies, so you can refer to other partners and services as needed and eliminate and greatly reduce barriers. Increased accountability is also important because it allows oversight and monitoring, and it's constantly being analyzed by others, whether it's your supervisor or a state or federal monitor. And this is to ensure that the participant is being properly served. As career planners, it fulfills an ethical requirement as you are all working in the helping profession, where your focus is on supporting and nurturing the growth of your participants in order to obtain that positive outcome. Your speaking, your listening, interpersonal, and problem-solving skills are all in constant motion. And because you are communicating with multiple participants on your caseload, these skills are critical in developing a good standard of practice when interacting with your participants. Let's look in a little more detail for the characteristics of a well-defined case note. So the categories here are clear, concise, useful, relevant, and timely. The first one on the list seems to be where we as monitors struggle sometimes. The case notes need to be written clearly enough so that anyone reading your case note can understand what's happening and with your participant at any given time. Many times you know exactly what you mean, but when we as monitors review your case notes, and if we don't understand what you're trying to say, then that leads us to trying to figure out what we think you mean. And the result of that is our interpretation may be inaccurate, just simply because the content isn't clear or it's missing critical information as what you intended to convey. So in the past, I've always trained staff to be as clear as possible when writing their case notes, because you never know who may be reading them, including a state or federal monitor. You want the monitors to get into your file, find the information they need quickly, and then get out of it. We want the same thing. If we have to spend extra time trying to dig around and trying to figure out what we think you mean, invariably we get distracted by other things we see, and we end up even having more questions. So take the time to fully write down your thoughts in a clear format. Case notes also need to be concise in as brief a format as possible. The information in your case notes must be useful. A just the facts kind of approach will serve you well when writing your case notes. They don't need a lot of extra fluff, but they do need to document the who, what, where, when, why, and how of the situation. The content should be relevant to the situation at hand. And if there are other conversations going on with your participant that aren't related to their IEP or ISS, just only document those parts of the conversation relevant to achieving your participants' goals and objectives. The case notes must be entered in a timely manner. For most participants in situations, regular contact is defined as two-way communication that occurs every 30 days. There should not be gaps in case notes entries with more than 30 days without contact or attempt to contact between the participant and the career planner or another staff member. So as a reminder, if you are providing a same-day service, you're providing a service to your customer, your case note must be recorded within 10 days of the service of the activity being completed. As monitors, we can see by the IWDS and the Illinois WorkNet time and date stamp on your case notes if you're entering them in a timely manner as defined by policy. The required content of a case note, if the specific details included in each case note will vary depending on the type of activity that's being recorded or your participant situation. So in general, case notes should include very specific elements. The sample in this screen is a scenario of a participant who has not been attending training as required due to childcare barriers. When formulating this case note, the case note outline should include a description, a purpose, content, outcome, and plan. So in this particular case, it starts off with a description of the visit. The participant is responding to a request from the career planner to come in for a meeting. The purpose is to discuss her lack of progress in school due to several absences. The participant states she's struggling to attend training because she doesn't have sufficient childcare and her babysitter isn't available due to personal issues. She's trying to make arrangements for a family member to watch her children, but that arrangement has not been confirmed yet. So the outcome was that the career planner saw a need and linked her to childcare resource and referral to see if she may be eligible for subsidized childcare assistance. The plans are to reconnect in a week to verify if she has secured childcare with family or if she followed through with filling out an application for childcare resource and referral. So everything we need to know about the situation is documented. So in a week or so, as monitors, we would expect to see some sort of updated case note as to how this situation was resolved. So what are we looking for when we're reading your case notes? There's so many times we see case note documentation about similar scenarios, but so much of the vital information is missing. And the body of the case note may simply say something like, customers having trouble going to school because their babysitter quit. And that may be all that's said. The thing is, you may have provided services and linkage, but it wasn't documented, which leads us to the famous quote at the bottom of the screen, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So if you are providing services, problem solving, etc., document it in your case note. We have no idea what you did for your participant if you don't write it down. So please give yourself credit for all the good work that you do on a daily basis to help your participants succeed. At a minimum, case notes that document services should answer the following questions in order to meet data validation requirements. What service was provided? What date was it provided? And why were the services provided? For example, you may have a participant who's failing math. Your case note could say, John is not making adequate progress in his math class. Arrangements were made to receive individual tutoring. A voucher was prepared to cover costs, and John was provided a copy. And John will attend tutoring every Wednesday at the Career Center at the college for 4 weeks. And another reminder at the bottom of the screen, when you provide a same-day service, you must enter it as a same-day service case note within 10 days of providing the service. This will be a repeating theme as we move through this presentation. Okay, 3 important rules for writing case notes. So let's go over some of those important rules. Record facts accurately and completely, behaviors you observed or statements you heard. Do not make judgments based on what you observed or heard, and never include opinions, stereotypical comments, or any offensive statements. If you must state an opinion that's relevant to WIOA Title I services, please be sure to label your statement as an opinion, such as it's the opinion of this career planner. Use clear, simple, concise language, including professional terminology. Use free resources such as Grammarly as a writing assistant to help with your grammar and spelling. Don't use slang, cliches, or jargon. Do not comment on details that are not relevant to the individual's participation in WIOA Title I services. Keep documentation focused on how events in the participant's life will affect goals and objectives identified in their IEP or ISS. Do not use discriminating statements, especially on the grounds of race, age, sex, with the exception of age, as it relates to youth participants. And avoid the use of abbreviations and acronyms as much as possible. This next slide is an actual case note we reviewed a year or so ago. And I saved this case note because it's a pretty good example of how we would not recommend that you document interaction with your participant. So right away, in looking at the very first case note sample, we see that Stan is in really big trouble. He obviously is not doing what the career planner expects of him, and she is not happy with Stan. So let's take a look here. The career planner writes, had a come to Jesus meeting with Stan today. He needs to better communicate. He needs to provide me with an update by the end of the week. So observe the personal feelings, the feelings of frustration, religious reference within the content. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. So how can we write this in an alternate way to get the same message across, but in a more neutral tone with just the facts and remove the emotion? Met with Stan today and discussed concerns regarding delay in completing his training program with the planned time frame. We also discussed need for regular contact while he's participating in training. Stan reports he had some personal issues to deal with that prevented him from attending his required classes. We discussed some options of either continuing with training or closing his file until a future date when his issues have been resolved and he's better able to dedicate time to attend required classes. Stan agreed to call and update me on or before this Friday, October 2nd, to let me know if he plans to return to training. So as we can see, Friday, October 2nd obviously came and went with no communication with Stan. And here was the next case note that was documented. He was not following through, so I dropped him. I would not recommend providing funding for him in the future or proceed very cautiously. Okay, so that's a little harsh. We still see a lot of emotion running through that note. The career planner seems to still be really irritated with Stan. So how can we remove the emotion from it and write it in a neutral, just the facts kind of way? There's been no further contact from Stan. Due to multiple delays in training and no message received by the deadline of October 2nd of his plans to return to school, I will move forward with exiting the file. No further services are planned at this time. I sent Stan a letter today to let him know his file will be closed and to contact me should he desire services in the future. So in these case note examples, we see that personal feelings and opinions are guiding the narrative in these entries. The career planner's frustration is very clear. So it is important to remain neutral. When working with adults and youth, there's bound to be conflict at times, but when a career planner states he needs to do this or he needs to do that, as it is written in this case note, well, we all know we cannot make somebody do something they don't want to do. We just can't. And that's why detailed case notes are critical to ensure facts are included to explain potential conflicts that may be developing. And a specific plan of action is also necessary to add in the case note to ensure the career planner and the participant are working together to reach a resolution if at all possible. So here's the best advice I can give after years of experience. Always remember to just believe in the good of people. If a participant is not doing what you expect, just do your best to guide him or her back to partnering with you within the boundaries of the program, and but always extend grace when you can. And most importantly, recognize the value that you have to help make a difference in a successful outcome for your participants. You are truly that important in this journey. Privacy and confidentiality. So let's take a look at that. What happens sometimes with a career planner? In your attempt to tell the whole story, you may inadvertently include information of a sensitive nature. There are privacy laws in place to protect your participants. So you want to be very mindful to not include sensitive topics on this list within the body of your case notes. Some information will need to be documented for eligibility purposes. However, just be mindful you are only documenting required information and not oversharing details that are not relevant to eligibility. So you as the career planner are responsible for maintaining privacy and confidentiality. WIOA policy chapter 8.2.2, privacy and security, provides guidelines for protecting participant privacy. So on this slide, there's just a few samples of subjects not to include in your case note. Usually breaches of confidentiality come in subsequent case notes after the intake's completed, where perhaps divorce is discussed, maybe domestic violence, problems with family members, gambling issues, legal issues. Probably the most common breach of confidentiality that we see as monitors pertains to medical issues. But several topics on this list have also been observed during monitoring. So when you look through this list, there are, again, some things on here that are required for eligibility. It's just not expanding on those so that you're crossing that boundary of revealing information that's not relevant to the eligibility. So the next slide is an actual case note that I came across. So when formulating your case note, just always be careful to not accidentally disclose medical information. It's okay to make a general statement regarding a medical or disability issue. Just don't provide specifics about these sensitive topics. Summarize the information for the purpose of addressing potential barriers and avoid specific details that could be considered a breach in confidentiality. So let's look at these two samples. Mary called and said she will need to reschedule our meeting on 1/21/22 because she has a doctor's appointment at the same time as our meeting to treat a severe rash on her body. We rescheduled for next week. Now, did we really need to document that she had a severe rash on her body? No. How can we reword it to eliminate the sensitive information? Let's try it this way. Mary called and said she would need to reschedule our meeting on 1/21/22 because she has a doctor's appointment at the same time. A new appointment was scheduled for 1/28/22 at 9 a.m. So even if your participants tell you personal information, which they do quite frequently, just don't include it in your case note if it's not relevant to the goals and objectives. There is, however, an exception in the event you feel additional information about a particular case is relevant to your decision-making process when serving the customer's needs. So there is an option in IWDS to make a case note confidential so that you as the career planner are the only one that can view it. This slide shows what your traditional case note looks like when you prepare to enter a case note. So the drop-down box next to confidential line always defaults to no, but you do have the option to change this to a yes if you feel it's necessary to document additional information. But if you're unsure as to whether you should enter a confidential case note, discuss it with your supervisor and make a decision as to whether it's even necessary. If you come to the conclusion that it is, try to be as brief as possible in the explanation and always have the protection of privacy for your participant in the forefront of your mind at all times. And just another side note for medical issues, make sure if you do have access to copies of medical issues or reports, that you are keeping them separate from the customer file. These need to be in a separate file, in a medical file, and locked up and secure. All right, top 3 case note issues. So let's move on to take a closer look at the top 3 case note issues identified in monitoring. So over the past 2 or 3 monitoring cycles, we've seen sort of a pattern development across the state in which there are prominent areas of concern regarding case note documentation. The same 3 issues continue to crop up over and over again in multiple monitoring events, and at times led to the LWIAs receiving findings when these issues were identified. So we're going to try to break these down, these 3 areas of concern, in the next 3 slides. The very first one, number 1 case note issue, is the significant delay in entering case notes, as well as the batching of case notes. This has been occurring so often that we just need to break it down and try to understand it together. So let's first look at the definition of batching. The definition of batching occurs when a career planner enters multiple case notes into the system all at the same time for past services performed over a period of many weeks, months, and sometimes even years, we've seen. The date timestamp will reflect multiple delinquencies for case notes not being entered in a timely manner. So batching of case notes is very strongly discouraged, as observations of this practice during monitoring may result in a programmatic finding. When we take a closer look at WIOA Policy Chapter 4, Section 2.7.2a, case notes, we are reminded case notes and file maintenance are vital to quality service and reporting. and they reflect the results of continuous career planning in detail so that the participant status is easily determined. The case notes for an open active service must document ongoing two-way communication between the career planner and the participant that describes how the service moves the participant toward their goals. Case notes must be entered into the appropriate case management system within 10 calendar days of the service delivery, and the regular contact typically 30 days. So again, general case notes that you're not providing service for, they need to be entered every 30 days. And if you are providing services, you need to get that case note in within 10 days of the service being provided. So let's look at a sample of this on the next slide to better clarify what batching might look like. So this IWDS case note screenshot is an example of delays in case note entries and batching of case notes. So as you can see, the first few entries were entered in a timely manner, starting at the bottom on 11/8/19. If you look at the created column on the far right, you can see that the case note was actually entered 10 days later on 11/18/19. The 12/12/2019 same-day service case note is the beginning of when entries started to become delinquent. The same-day service case note on 12/12/2019 was not entered until 9/17/20, over 9 months later. And remember, that is supposed to be entered in there within 10 days. There was no case note entered for the month of January 2020, and the next 4 case notes for 2/20/20, 3/30/20, 4/15/20, 5/20/20 were all entered on the same day. In other words, batched together on the same day of 9/17/20, reflecting a significant data lag for all of those entries. So when monitoring, we're just not looking at your case notes. We're also comparing your case note dates to the actual time date stamp of your entries in order to determine if compliance is being met for entering your case notes within 10 days of providing a service, and every 30 days for general case note entries as policy requires. So remember, I said we're trying to get to the yes answer in our monitoring question. So for example, let's say I'm trying to answer the monitoring question that states, there is documentation reflecting that meaningful two-way communication is occurring within a 90-day time frame. So how would I answer that, do you think, if I was looking at this? Well, it'd be a definite no for this question. And when we answer no to any monitoring question, it triggers a finding. Because remember, you're supposed to be documenting every 30 days. And if there are no services provided within 90 days, what are you supposed to be doing next? What are the next steps? Well, there's only 2 ways. You either try to re-engage the customer in services, or you move forward toward exiting. None of that happened here, but I can tell you what did happen. When we sent the list of samples to the LWIA and this participant name was on the list, for monitoring, the assigned career planner went in to check this file to prepare for monitoring and realized he had not entered in meaningful two-way case notes since November 2019. So he hurried and stuck in multiple case notes on September 17, 2020. But it was too late, because when he added these, we can now see that he batched all of the notes on the same day just by looking at the time date stamps. These were so delinquent, so he obviously was not staying in contact with the participant every 30 days or entering in same-day service entries within 10 days as required. So why is this happening? We're trying to figure out why it's happening. So when we broke this issue down to try to understand the reasons behind why this may be happening, we came up with some reasons. So on the left, we've identified some potential barriers that could be happening. Finding the time to complete case notes, work balance, time management. So many of you work out in the field and maybe work with youth and work experience or apprenticeships, securing contracts for OJT, whatever it may be that you may be out in the field and just not have a lot of time in the office to complete case notes. You may not be in the office regularly and you find yourself falling behind on getting your case notes completed. but the result of delaying entering your case notes for too long most certainly compromises the quality of your case notes. Some career planners do not have an understanding of time-sensitive requires for case note entries. They may have never been trained on the 10-day requirement for same-day service or the 30-day requirements for case note entries, for general case note entries. Career planner attributes, which is simply your personality characteristics, which influences your desire to succeed at work, to establish good work habits, and the ability to recognize distractions and move them out of your way to accomplish your goals in the workplace. So what are some solutions to these barriers? If you find yourself falling behind in your case notes and aren't able to enter case notes on a daily basis, which is the best practice, talk with your supervisor and set aside a designated time each week to enter all of your case note for that week's activities. Completing these in a timely manner on a regular basis every week will definitely prevent data lag in your entries. Request additional assistance from your supervisor so that you have a good understanding as to what time-sensitive requirements need to be applied when entering case notes. And utilize samples provided by the state as a sample to writing a good case note. And I'm going to show you some of those a little bit later in this presentation. You can also run reports in the IPAT system within Illinois WorkNet on a weekly basis, and you can keep your caseloads under control. So for those of you that aren't familiar with IPATs, it is an acronym for Illinois Performance Accountability and Transparency System, and it can be accessed by using your Illinois WorkNet username and password. The system provides the most accurate and up-to-date information for your participants. So the LWIA directors, supervisors, and staff should all have access to IPAT system within Illinois WorkNet to run frequent reports to ensure consistency and quality of services. If you don't have an Illinois WorkNet account set up already, you will need to do that in order to access IPATs. Standing meetings should also be scheduled with career planners to review and discuss strategies that follow WIOA Policy 4.2, career planning policy guidance, in order to increase the efficacy of program and participant outcomes. So this is a sample screen of IPATs reflecting results for the whole state. These numbers have improved over the last few months, but we still have some work to do. So as monitors, we're constantly looking at the big picture for the whole state to see how well things are going across the board. So when we take a closer look at this, we are looking to see if there's a more systemic issue across the state for case notes not getting entered in a timely manner, or services not being provided as required by policy. So because case note delinquencies and lack of services being provided have both been identified in several LWIAs during monitoring, it was determined we need a more in-depth training for case notes, and that's what led us to be here together today. The good thing is these reports can be filtered down to just look at your own LWIA, but most importantly, it can be filtered way down even further to see your own individual career planner reports. We recommend you run your own individual reports weekly to stay on top of your caseloads. Multiple reports are available for you to run, as you can see in this IPAT screen, but there are other reports besides these that can also be of benefit. These are the best tools you have right at your fingertips to assist you in catching issues early, and by updating your case note entries in a timely manner to prevent delinquencies, avoid potential data lags, and ultimately prevent findings during monitoring. Let's go ahead and move on to the number 2 case note issue, the misuse or lack of use of same-day service. There's so much confusion around same-day service case note entries. So let's talk about the difference between same-day service case notes and general case notes. Every time you get ready to enter a case note, you have to make a decision as to what type of case note needs to be entered. So how do you do that? Let's look at the definitions. Same-day service is staff-assisted activities that are completed in one day. The same activity could be delivered again on one or more additional days, but each occurrence is considered another episode. General case notes are all other activities with the customer on behalf of the customer or on behalf of the customer that do not constitute a service as defined by the goals and objectives in the IEP or the ISS. So let's look at some of these barriers. Some case notes are documented as same-day service, but the case note does not reflect a specific connection to a service or activity. We see that a lot. Other case notes are clearly same-day service contacts, but the case note is entered as a general case note only. So entering it this way in IWDS prevents IWDS from auto-updating the end date on the service line, potentially causing the participant to appear as if he or she has not received any services at all. So difficulty in determining type of contact, same-day service communication versus a general two-way communication case note entry, where case notes are unclear if communication with the participant actually occurred. Lack of knowledge on how to enter a same-day service case note, or not entering same-day service case notes at all, which we have observed when monitoring. So what's some of the solutions? When services are provided, always enter case notes as a same-day service through the service screen. Use the Add Additional Episode button to enter. This process resets the end date automatically on the service line and keeps the service date current. Use the note subject line to clarify what occurred as to whether it is a same-day service in which services or activities were provided, or a general entry that was not connected to a service or activity. Review current state training PowerPoints on Illinois WorkNet, which includes step-by-step instructions on how to enter a same-day service case note. Or ask for additional technical assistance either from your supervisor, or we can also provide additional technical assistance if needed for your area. So on this screen, the following activities do constitute a WIOA Title I service, and these type of services should be entered as a same-day service in the service screen in IWDS by the use of the Add Additional Episode button. So again, we are following along with WIOA Policy Chapter 4, Section 2.6, Service Documentation Case Management. All WIOA Title I services provided to a participant must be entered into the appropriate case management system within 10 calendar days of the service delivery. So some examples on this list of same-day services are completing intake, assessment, testing, development of an IEP, engaging in two-way communication, which includes discussion of progress, changes, or concerns as related to goals and objectives listed on the IEP, reviewing class schedules and book list requirements with the participant, preparing book tuition vouchers, verifying enrollment into transportation childcare, obtaining signatures for a participant for required documents, discussing supportive service requests with the participant, reviewing requirements and allowable costs, preparing payment vouchers for required supplies, services, tools, receiving attendance records from the participant, reviewing attendance records for accuracy, then calculating and processing for mileage reimbursement, conferring with the participant to discuss barriers to achieving goals and objectives, providing linkage to other partners to support the needs of the participant, assisting participant with job search assistance, job referral, placement, and relocation, conducting on-site visits for work experience, on the job training, etc., apprenticeships to assess progress as related to the goals and objectives, communicating with the participant when conducting 90-day IEP and ISS reviews together, and documenting progress and changes as it relates to the goals and objectives. These are all same-day services, and they should be entered that way. The service screen must reflect all of the services that have been or are currently being provided to the participant. So service records must be closed and ended with an indication of completion status, successful or unsuccessful, within 10 days of learning the completion of the service. Outcomes of education and training services such as credentials and measurable skill gains attained must be entered within 10 days of learning of the attainment. And for Chicago Cook workforce partnership providers that use Career Connect as a case management system, guidance on data entry specific to Career Connect can be found at the link in the resources tab. But all the data entry time requirements addressed in this policy must also be followed by career planners using Career Connect. All documentation must be contained in the participant's physical file and be available for review as requested during compliance monitoring. Career planners are to upload all relevant documentation in the participant's physical case file into an appropriate case management system as directed by the monitoring staff, and that's for remote monitoring only and data validation. So the following examples on this screen do not constitute a WIOA Title I service, nor contact with the participant, and should be entered as a general case note only. Here are some examples of that. Speaking with the participant's relative. So if you call and you call and you're looking for John and you talk to Johnny's mama, and she says she doesn't have any updates or doesn't understand what you're asking of her, that is not a same-day service. These are just general case note entries if you're speaking to relatives and not the participant himself or herself. If you're sending flyers, letters, emails to the participant, that's a general case note entry. Speaking with the participant's probation or parole officer, having a casual conversation with the participant in public, having the participant simply bring in time or attendance records for payment when no meaningful service discussion guidance was provided. So if they're just dropping off an attendance record and you're not processing it for payment, somebody else is doing that, then that just needs to be entered as a general case note. Sending contact me or contact our office's messages via email, U.S. Postal Service, or telephone. Regular contact with the participant or employer to only obtain information regarding his or her employment status, educational progress status, need for additional services, or income support payments. There must be meaningful service provided. And if there's no services being provided, then you need to enter that as a general case note. Any kind of commentary, opinions on participants' personal circumstances that are unrelated to employment and training activities and pursuits. So one of the most frequent errors we see is the career planner's attempt to contact a participant and documenting this as a same-day service case note in error. So on the next slide, let's take a look at some actual case note samples we came across during monitoring. This first actual case note was an attempt to contact the participant. So as you can see on the left side, this represents how the case note was incorrectly entered by the career planner. So remember, when choosing to use the note category of same-day service, you must actually be providing a service. As we've learned, attempting to contact a participant is not considered a same-day service, as there were no services provided. So when monitors see a same-day service case note entered and the note subject says contact, as this one does, we would expect to see that you actually made contact with the participant and provided a service. But as you can see from the case note itself, it simply states called and left message. So how should an attempt to contact be correctly recorded? Let's look at the right side of the screen for the correct entry. First, you would enter the note category as a general, since you did not provide a service. And the note subject line would be expanded to state attempt to contact for December 2021, rather than just saying contact, because there was no contact. And the body of the case note would also be expanded to explain the message left for the participant, which was called Morgan and left a message requesting she return my call to provide me with an update on progress in school. This next slide is a case note example of contact with participant for a training update. On the left side, you see that it was entered as case note supporting same-day service. Subject is contact, and case note simply says client still in school. This does not reflect that a service was provided at all. So on the right side, This is how you would correctly enter that. You would put case note supporting same-day service. The note subject would be school update, March 2021, request for calculator. Now, I know that because when I reviewed this file, I could see that they did provide services on that day and provided a voucher for a calculator. However, the case note was not reflecting that. It just simply said client still in school. It didn't talk about anything to do with providing an actual service. So you want to, again, make sure you're giving yourself credit when you're providing those services. So the case note itself could have been expanded to what actually happened. Called and talked to Cindy today about her progress in spring 2021 semester. Cindy reports she's current on her homework assignments and is maintaining A's and B's in her classes. She has no concerns at this time, but states she will be needing a scientific calculator. A supportive service voucher was prepared for the calculator, and Cindy will come in tomorrow to sign the voucher and take it to the bookstore. And she remains on track for completing training, continues making satisfactory progress in her classes. That's what actually happened that day, not what they documented on the left side. They didn't give themselves any credit for all of the services that were provided. So this is what a correct entry would look like on the right. And the next screen is a sample of attendance records. On the left side, it shows the note category as same-day service. The note subject just simply says update, and case note says received attendance. The correct entry side should have looked like this. Case note supporting same-day service. The note subject, October 2021 attendance processed. That's the key. On the left, it said just received attendance. It didn't say they did anything, so they didn't provide any service. However, if you have an attendance record and you actually calculate it and send it into accounting for processing, that's a service. So make sure you're giving yourself credit for that. Document it as a same-day service. Expand your note subject line to explain that you are providing the service by saying that you received it and the attendance was processed. And then in the body of the case note, expand that to say, just stop by the office and turn in her October attendance. Attendance record reflects she attended all required classes, completed mileage calculations, and sent form to be processed for reimbursement. Okay, now we can see that you actually provided that service. So this same-day service note category is correct. So the third case note issue is the top 3 case note areas of concern is the case notes are missing required content, or there's no chronological order to the case notes. So there's just a complete lack of order as to when services were provided with no connection back to goals and objectives. During our programmatic monitorings, we've observed this quite often. There's no specific rhyme or reason to how case notes are entered, and it becomes very confusing to us as to what you actually did with your customer. So many times there may be an initial brief case note regarding intake, but then suddenly with the next case note entry, there's this huge time jump where the career planner is suddenly talking about receiving attendance from the customer for a training program. We're like, wait a minute, what? You did the intake, and then all of a sudden you're gathering attendance records for a person in school. So it's missing the guts, all the meat and potatoes of all the in-between requirements. So the documentation's missing of your decision-making process for enrollment into services. You have to verify and validate your decision-making process for putting someone into training or any service, really. At times, there's no record in the case notes discussing determination of eligibility, assessment and testing, determination of services, IEP, ISS development, determination of eligibility for training services. And sometimes there's no written validation in the IEP or the ISS for why a participant was enrolled in a certain service either. So there's nothing for us to go on when we try to figure out how you concluded a participant needed a particular service if you aren't putting in very specific and required case notes. So why is this happening? Trying to figure out why that might be happening. So we come to the conclusion that part of it may be lack of training on how to properly formulate a case note to include all of those required components, lack of training on entering case notes in chronological order to validate the decision-making process of the participant's enrollment into services. And then we see the bad habit of copying and pasting the exact same case note in month after month after month. Please avoid doing this. The entries must be specific to the progress for each of your participants, and cookie cutter type of case notes should never be entered. One example of a cookie cutter type case note would be every month the career planner adds a case note with a note subject that just says update. And then the body of the case note just says customer is still attending school. This tells us absolutely nothing. So don't do that. Avoid cookie cutter case notes and avoid one-word note subject lines. Whatever you're doing with the participant that day, make sure you're specific in those note subject lines. Don't just use one words. Another thing that's happening are these monthly copied and pasted blanket letters and emails in your case note that aren't really applicable to some of your participants. Blanket meaning you're sending them out to all your registrants on all your caseload. Everybody gets the same letter. And even though LWE will send out monthly letters, sometimes they send out letters and they remind students to come in and get their vouchers. But if you're sending them to everybody, sometimes we see that those letters have gone out to people that have already graduated. And that just plays havoc for a state monitor when these kinds of correspondence don't match with the rest of the case notes, because we're thinking, wait a minute, I thought I just read that person graduated. Why are they being sent a letter to come in for more vouchers for the next semester? So we spend a lot of time backtracking, trying to figure out what's going on and what you're doing. So from this day forward, just pay attention to the content of those blanket type monthly emails and letters you're sending to your participants, and don't send them to those participants to whom the content no longer applies. So what's a good solution to this third case note issue? To develop a good quality case note, the easiest format to remember is the RAP method. It's a little bit more of a condensed version that includes R for reason of contact, A for action, and P for plans or progress. So let's see what this looks like when putting the RAP method of writing a case note into action. So in this case note, it is entered as a same-day service based on the services provided. So as you can see, the note subject line is also specific to the services provided. It clearly identifies the reason for the contact, which is the participant bringing in his fall grades, and also the participant is in need of a spring voucher for the upcoming semester. He also needs a supportive service voucher for a supply. The action was that the career planner verified all spring classes were on the curriculum and then issued the vouchers for tuition and fees, and also completed a supportive service voucher for the supply. Measurable skills gain entry was completed. Progress for this participant is satisfactory with a GPA of 3.9. Plan is to continue in the HVAC program, and he is on track to complete training within the time period projected on his IEP. Everything we need to know is captured using the RAP method. So when writing your case notes, be specific as to what type of contact you had with your participant. Acceptable ways of contact are phone calls, emails, social media, text message, in-person contact, virtual meetings, and contacts. So just let us know in your subject line or case note how you're communicating with your participant. That will give us a heads up that you're actually having two-way communication with your participant. And one more quote, this time from an anonymous lawyer who cautions, dance like no one is watching, but text and email like it will be read in court one day. And there's a lot of truth to that. So when you're using text messages and emails to communicate, just be mindful of the content that you're putting out there in the universe. This next slide is kind of a cheat sheet and in order to preserve emails that are sent to you from your participants. So instead of paraphrasing what a participant's email said in your case note, what you can do is simply pull up the participant's email, then hit reply. This automatically condenses the participant's email down to a format that can be easily copied and pasted into a case note. And the time date stamp is on there, all in one nice and neat condensed version. So just a simple hack to make things easier for you so you're not paraphrasing or recreating an email from a customer. Let's move on to sample case notes. When we review policy 4.2.7, which pertains to case notes, and how this policy comes into effect when developing content for required case notes. And we'll also look at some case note samples. We've already addressed several areas of this policy, which include the importance of file maintenance, documenting two-way communication for active services, timeline for when same-day services need to be entered, cross-coordination of services, linkage to referrals, and the importance of writing quality case notes. So just use this screen as a reference to look back on should you need to. In addition to all those requirements, the case note history must reflect the following information. So introduction, you need a complete description of the status of the individual at participation, including an explanation of their overall need for services. This case note will elaborate on eligibility, intake, and assessment results to give a clear picture of the individual, their barriers, strengths and skills, training preferences, and possible support service needs. The determination of the training need. The career planner must document the suitability of the training and retraining program with participants' needs. In cases where training and retraining is required for a participant to enter or re-enter the workforce successfully, the training selected must be directly linked to employment opportunities in the local area or the planning region or in an area to which a participant is willing to commute or relocate. The training begin date, a case note must be entered when the participant enters training and is to include the date the training began, the training program, training provider, approximate cost, and planned end date. The training end date is a case note to be entered to reflect that the participant's training has ended and include the following: the date the training ended, the name of the program, whether the participant completed training, and the credential license status. The service enclosure is a full description of the participant's status at exit, must be case noted, and include employment or non-employment, career name, hire date, hours, and wage. Any exclusion must also be described. And follow-up, a full description of the follow-up services and information provided to WIOA Title I participants. This will become more clear as we take a closer look at some of these sample case notes. I created 3 sample case notes for this training, which will guide you on the right path to thoroughly and accurately document critical areas that must be included in your case note documentation. These 3 case note samples are very detailed and capture the required content necessary in order to validate your reasons for enrolling a participant into services. So let's take a look at case note samples for intake and eligibility determination, summary of assessment and testing, determination of services, and the development of an individual employment plan. Suggestions for using the samples are just to keep these on a folder in your desktop and refer to these samples when you first begin working with a participant. But keep in mind, these are just suggested samples only. So if you want to create your own local samples for these same types of case notes that follow your own local procedures for enrolling new participants, that's perfectly fine. However, you will need to make sure that the components of the sample case notes in this presentation are also captured in your local samples as well. This is just a general overview of the requirements for an intake eligibility case note. This case note's critical as it documents registration to IWDS, and it will be reviewed during monitoring and data validation activities. So many times during monitoring, the case note is missing entirely. So we need to get back on track with getting this documented in the right way into IWDS or Illinois WorkNet. This initial case note must contain the following: why the participant is being enrolled in WIOA Title I services and what future services and activities will be provided. For adult and dislocated worker participants, the participating enrolling service, as in initial assessment and what other services were provided on the same day of the participation date, eligibility determination, overview of WIOA Title I program, IEP. For youth participants, the objective assessment, individual service strategy, and the first youth element provided. The date of the first element provided will be the participation date in WIOA Title I services. So the next slide is your first sample, which is an intake eligibility determination sample case note, and this is for a 1A participant. So as you can see, the format is fill in the blank. So for every participant, this will look different depending on your participant's circumstances. As you can see in reading through the sample right off the bat, eligibility is stated clearly in the first paragraph. As you read on, you can see that demographics of the participant are provided in the next paragraph, with the next section stating what the customer is seeking services for. Education, results of the basic skills screening tool, and referrals are also addressed. If the participant expresses an interest in training, the career planner is required to provide the participant with the ETPL state provider list in order to ensure the participant is made aware of all of their options before making a final decision for training. Even though a participant comes in and expresses they already know what they want to do, the career planner is still obligated to share that list. And the final paragraph is acknowledging the application has been completed and the paperwork signed with plans to meet again. And to wrap things up, a list of services provided and also a list of any future services to potentially be provided are documented. So here's what we're going to do. For clarification of this process and for training purposes, we're going to follow a fictional participant named Jess to see what the final results of filling in the blanks of these case notes would look like. So in this slide, we see the final result with all of Jess's information completed by using that sample fill in the blank case note. So what do we learn about Jess now that the blanks have been filled in? Well, one, she meets eligibility for 1A because she received SNAP's benefits. She brought in all of her required documentation. She's working part-time, she's a single parent, and she's not a veteran. She's interested in training to become an LPN. Her basic skills screening tool reflects she does not have basic skills deficiencies, and there are no referrals planned at this time. She was given a copy of the EPTL training provider list. An application was completed and signatures obtained on all required documents, follow-up appointments scheduled, and services provided were documented as well as potential future services. So the next sample is how to create a summary of assessment and testing, determination of services. Documenting results of your summary of assessment and testing and determination of services are extremely important. But with so much information, where in the world do you even start? Well, you got to start somewhere. So the first thing you do is review the participants' assessment and test results. Develop a good understanding as to what the results and the scores mean. And if you don't understand a result or a score, look for the interpretation within the assessment or test narrative for clarification, or ask a supervisor for assistance. It's really very important that you interpret the data correctly so you can begin to develop an employment and training plan for your participant. Extract information from your assessment and testing results that you want to include in your comprehensive case note. And this can include aptitude scores, interest, abilities, etc. You will be utilizing this information to start building your comprehensive assessment case note. Review information you obtain from conducting an in-depth interview with your participant. And this additional information will assist you in making determinations regarding your participant's service needs. Analyze the results of the assessments, test, and in-depth interview together and see the complete picture. There must be a clear conclusion once you have reviewed, and this information will validate your decision-making process regarding services you plan to enroll your participant in. Create a comprehensive assessment case note based on all of the data you have reviewed. Consider using the state sample for summary of assessment and testing to ensure all relevant information is included to clearly validate your decisions for enrollment into services. So all of this has to be completed first before you can even begin to create a summary case note of your findings. So as an example, let's view an assessment tool called CareerScope. We're going to take a little bit closer look at this process. So remember, we are assessing a fictional participant named Jess who wants to be an LPN. So for training purposes, let's take a look at the results of Jess's CareerScope and see how well she did and how this plays an important role in determining whether she is suitable for training and whether her aptitude scores and test scores support her choice of enrollment into LPN training. Several LWIAs use CareerScope, but other LWIAs use a similar type of aptitude and interest assessment. So in that case, simply extract similar information from the assessments used in your local area. So this first screen represents Jess's interests and also her aptitude scores. Remember, she wants to be an LPN, so keep that in mind as we review these results. So I've highlighted her top 3 interests. Her highest score is humanitarian, which falls right in line with her interest in wanting to be a nurse. Her second highest score is scientific, and the third is protective. So far, so good, as her interests line up with her desire to go into nursing. The second set of scores are Jess's aptitude scores. One of the most important scores in this section is her general learning ability score, which is 84, which is on the low end of average. This score is most closely tied to success in school, so it is very important to pay attention to the score. We don't want to set Jess up to fail, so we will keep the score in the back of our mind as we analyze the rest of her results. The good news is she has a very high score in numerical aptitude, almost off the charts, so this is very encouraging. The second highest score is spatial aptitude, and the third is clerical perception, with both falling into the average range. So far, Jess is looking pretty good, but we need to look at more information. The next slide actually has definitions of the interests built into the test. So if you remember, her number 1 interest was humanitarian. Humanitarian is highlighted toward the bottom of the slide. And so if you look over to the occupational column and all the way to the right for humanitarian, you will clearly see that the word nurse is listed there. So that's looking pretty good. This slide spells out let's see. There we go. This slide spells out the definitions for Jess's aptitude scores. So when you're looking at the top left where the general learning ability aptitude is highlighted, the definition to the right of that states the ability to catch on, understand instructions, ability to reason and make judgments, closely related to doing well in school. That is why we are looking at the big picture for Jess, because she scores a little low within the average range. But for numerical reasoning, remember she scored extremely high. So this will serve her well when training to become a nurse. And third, her score in clerical reasoning was average. And as you can see in the description, this is the ability to perceive pertinent detail in verbal or tabular material. Example would be to check work order specifications for errors. This will also serve her well when performing as a nurse. Now I'm feeling a little bit better about making a determination as to whether Jess is a good candidate for nursing. This screen reflects recommendations for occupations based on Jess's current aptitudes, interests, and skills level. The black dots represent occupations that she already has enough skills to be able to perform successfully in these types of jobs. But if you look at the far right column and count 6 spaces down from the top, you will see that there is no black dot for nurses. That is exactly what you need to see, as this represents the participant has a definite skills gap in what skills she currently has versus what she needs in order to become a nurse. So now you're most likely able to justify putting her into a training program based on all of the elements we just reviewed. The only other components to complete your assessment is to review test scores for math and reading and the application, and look for any barriers during your in-depth interview that may prevent Jess from becoming a licensed practical nurse. For example, if Jess answered the application question yes for having a felony, that could put a huge glitch in your plans to enroll her in a medical program and could literally stop her in her tracks. She could attend the training, but she most likely would never be able to get a job as a nurse with a felony. So this is when you would have to redirect possibly to another type of training if that happened. So make sure you are looking at the whole picture, which includes analyzing assessments, test scores, and reviewing answers from your in-depth interview before making decisions on placing a participant in training. I remember years ago, I had a customer that wanted to go into auto mechanics, and he wanted a 2-year degree. And I did the assessment. I did everything up front. There were no barriers. Off he went. And 2 years later, he graduated. And he was so excited. He was an older worker. He was 62 years old. And he was so excited to graduate. And he got a job almost immediately, but a couple of weeks later, he called. He's like, Robin, I have a problem. And I said, oh my gosh, well, what's wrong? And he said, well, I got this job, but they're asking me to do something that I can't do. And I said, well, what are they asking you to do? And he said, well, I can fix the cars. I can do everything they asked me to do, but they're asking me after I fix them to test drive them. And I said, okay. Oh, so what's the problem? He said, I haven't had a driver's license in over 20 years. I was so shocked. I couldn't even believe it. I mean, I was just dumbfounded. I was like, Jerry, how did you get to school for 2 years back and forth every day? You're going to school every day, 30 miles one way, 30 miles back. He said, my wife drove me every day. So isn't that crazy? This is the importance of getting all of the information up front. Luckily, the employer kept him on and they just found somebody else to test drive the cars. But you can think you ask all the right questions sometimes, but sometimes you don't get, when I asked him, do you have adequate transportation to get to and from school? He said yes, because he did. But I didn't know that he did not have a driver's license. And anyway, it's just one example of things that happen along the way. So just do your best to gather all the information, especially some of those little helpful hints when you're going through your application process and doing your in-depth interview. You probably want to just expand on some of those questions. Okay, now that we've gathered all the pertinent information for this participant and analyzed results of assessment, tests, and in-depth interview, we're ready to start building our summary case note for assessment and testing, and also making our determination for services. So This is another fill in the blank. It's just a sample again. You can make your own, but all of the components are here should you want to use these. And this is specifically designed, as you can see, assessment testing and in-depth interview are addressed at the beginning of this case note, and you'll also see references to identifying transferable skills, completion of a budget worksheet, determination of suitable employment, identifying barriers, specific information about chosen training program, labor market information, documentation of services to be provided, and filing for financial aid. And this slide is a result after filling in the blanks of the sample summary of assessment and testing and determination of services. So all of your documentation is included, and most importantly, supports your decision to enroll Jess into a training program. It is a very detailed case note that meets federal and state requirements for completing a thorough assessment prior to enrollment into services. The third sample is a fill in the blank of the development of an IEP. This case note covers suitable employment is either available or not available. Barriers are addressed, training details are included, the setting of short and long-term goals, the inclusion of how the customer envisions his or her success after completion of training, listing of services, projected start and end dates for training, estimated costs, and 90-day IEP reviews. And here is the results of filling in the blanks. So if you can just spend the extra time to get these sample critical case notes right at the get-go, it will go a long way to setting the tone for how the rest of your case notes will fall into place. They will be chronological, they will meet state and federal guidelines, and they will validate your decision-making processes for enrolling your participants into services. So this way, no matter who reads your case notes, we will all now be able to follow your path in telling the story for each of your participants. So this last section has to do with exits, which is, it can be confusing as well. This is WIOA section 677-150C, as defined for the purpose of performance calculations. An exit is the point after which a participant has received services through any program meets the following criteria. For the adult and dislocated worker and youth programs authorized under WIOA Title I, the last date of service cannot be determined until at least 90 days have elapsed since the participant has last received services. So services do not include self-service, information-only services, or activities, follow-up services. This also requires that there are no plans to provide the participant with future services. And furthermore, section 677-150C indicates that follow-up services do not extend the date of exit, and section 116 of WIOA requires states to ensure data submitted and reported to the department is valid and reliable. So that's a big old mouthful. So we're going to just break it down just a little bit more on this slide for case note requirements for exit. So what do you document during this 90-day time period? It's critically important when planning participant exits that career planners enter in the appropriate type of case note for the 90-day period prior to exit. So if a career planner has determined the participant needs no further services and no further staff assisted services, it is extremely important during that 90-day time period that case notes are not entered via the mechanism add additional episode for same-day services. We harp on the whole time you've got somebody in training, we want you to add same-day service case notes when you're providing services. However, at the very end, when you have provided all the services, maybe your customer's graduated and gotten a job, then we don't want you entering in same-day services anymore if you're planning to exit. So for those 90 days, you will actually be entering, you'll start your countdown, you'll start general case notes only should be recorded during the 90-day time period when no services are being provided. Since these general entries do not impact and they don't reset the last date of service. So follow-up services may begin immediately following the last date of service if it is expected that the participant will not receive any future services other than follow-up services. There are a few exclusions to that. Institutionalized, that they've been incarcerated, and it's expected to last longer than 90 days. A medical issue that's expected to last longer than 90 days. The participant is deceased. Reservist recalled to active duty, and it's expected, the active duty is expected to last longer than 90 days. And foster care, the participant is in foster care system and has moved from the local workforce innovation area. So those are some exclusions to the 90 days. So what do you document? I mean, what do you put in there in those 90 days when you're not providing a service? You're still communicating, right, with your participant during this time. So what things do you write about, really? Well, some examples to follow for follow-up services are verification of employment, inquiries on how current job search or how employment is going, providing a job lead, maybe let them know of a job fair, labor market information, providing referrals to other community resources as needed, assistance with job search, resume development, general counseling about the workplace, discussion of any work-related concerns. Just document for the 90 days under general case notes entry only when you are planning to exit. And remember, the exit date will be retroactive back to the last date of service. So keep that in mind. I know exits can be confusing. So if you need additional help on that, talk to your supervisor so that you have a very clear understanding of how to document that. And we can also provide technical assistance should there still be confusion on that. But it is hard to get a grasp on how that needs to be documented. We're certainly happy to help. So on the very end of this presentation, we have self-review and guidelines for creating templates. So I've shown you 3 sample case notes along the way. So if you want to advance the slide there, Kirsten. You can see guidelines for creating your own templates. I created 3 for you today with those sample fill in the blanks, but if you want to take a gander at it and create your own samples, these are some guidelines that you would want to follow should you want to create your own your guidelines. You've got job search assistance, workshops and group activities, work experience, occupational, next slide, occupational skills training, on the job training, supportive services, incentive payments. There's just a partner services. There's just a lot of guidelines there to create your own templates. Sometimes when you have new staff that have come on board and they aren't sure of exactly how to write up a case note, it's helpful to just have a guide and just have a create a fill in the blank, just like I showed you today. It can be very easy to use as a tool for especially new people coming on board that aren't exactly sure. One thing I did want to add, there was a question last time I did this presentation about, can you only write a case note in third person? And the answer to that is, for us as monitors, we don't care if you write third person or first person. However, your local policy and your local guidelines is what you want to follow. So if your agency requires that you write in third person, then write in third person. But just as many write in first person. You know, they may say, I talked to John today. That's first person. Third person is case manager talked to John today. We don't care how you write it, but I want you to follow your local policy. Okay. All right. And I think we've come to the end here with this last slide with questions. And if you have any, I think we're going to take some from the chat possibly, or we maybe open up the mics. I'm not sure, Kirsten. I'll follow your lead there.
Yeah, so we can allow everybody to unmute themselves. So they should be able to do that now. And if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat. Right now, there's not any in the chat.
Okay.
Questions or anything, so.
Okay.
We'll give everyone a second here. I'm just going to do some ending housekeeping things. So again, I just want to thank everyone for joining this session again. We appreciate your flexibility. I know the link got changed, and so I appreciate your flexibility with that. You will have a follow-up survey and a URL link in your follow-up email tomorrow that will have the recording and the PowerPoint slide and the follow-up survey available to you. So you will have free access to all of that. And then we just ask that if you take a second for the follow-up survey, we would greatly appreciate that. And it looks like you have a comment in the chat, Robin, from Diana. It is very good and thorough training. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone that joined today. I really appreciate you joining. And if you have further questions, you need clarification on something, you can feel free to contact me. So thank you so much. Great spending time with you today.
Yes, thank you. And I also just wanted to put a plug in too on our Illinois Workforce Academy website, on the session that was in April that Robin did for us over the same topic, case notes. There were quite a few questions on that session, and she did put out like an FAQ amendum. So if you wanted to go, maybe, somebody else has a question that you haven't even thought of, you could go check out that resource as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I don't see any other questions coming through. So thank you so much for everyone attending today. And thank you, Robin, for another great presentation. Have a great Wednesday, everybody.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.